My name is Jim West, and today is September 25th, 2025, and we're here today with a panel for BTI Alive number 12 about quality. So, good enough isn't good enough, talking about quality that scales. And today I'm excited to welcome you to our panel. We have Ross Bundy with CRISPR QC. We have Michelle Moravia with Quality Means Business, Axel Strombergson at Viva Systems, Nicole Cannon at Cannon Quality Group. So I'm going to let our panelists go ahead and invite themselves. And as a reminder, the first hour of our webinar is live streamed, and we reserve 30 minutes for private Q&A discussion with the cohort. And with that, Axel, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey everybody, good morning. Thanks for joining this panel. My name is Axel Strombergson. I am the Vice President at Viva Systems, and specifically I work on a product that we call QuickVault that you can see up here in the corner. QuickVault is an EQMS electronic quality management system platform for smaller life sciences companies like yourselves. I've been with Viva for about 3.5 years now, and prior to that, I was over 20 years in the medtech space, primarily with a few number of startups. I have a background in engineering and from Sweden originally, and in the early 2000s, I joined a surgical device company where I led R&D, and that eventually took me to the US 14 years ago. Today, we are going to touch upon academia and research and how quality ties into that. And from that perspective, I also spent a few years at Vanderbilt University in Nashville at the tech transfer office. So I worked with researchers developing various types of life sciences products, including devices, diagnostics, laboratory developed tests, and so on and so forth. In addition to that, we are a sponsor of MedTech Innovators. I've also been highly involved over the past 10 years in various accelerators, incubators, mentoring startups, and supporting in different ways. So hopefully in the conversation today, I can bring some insights that you all find helpful. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks, Axel. And Michelle.
Great. Michelle Moravia, CEO of Quality Means Business. We've introduced the industry's first intelligent software that democratizes, accelerate, and de-risk bringing new product to market. My background, 15 plus years, everything med tech, biopharma, have well over 2 dozen devices cleared under my name. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Michelle. And Nicole.
Hi, Nicole, founder of Cannon Quality Group. We've been an outsourced quality department for the last 16 years. And our focus is helping anybody, any company, whether it's a device company or a supplier to a device company, lab company, really execute the quality department in a way that makes sense for their business and is efficient and functional and really not fear-based. That's our focus and what we do.
Okay. And Ross.
I'm Ross Bundy, the CEO and co-founder of CRISPR QC. I'm a three-time startup founder, mostly in biotools. CRISPR QC is actually an alumni of the biotools program, class of 2023. And I'm building a business selling into quality control, as you can imagine, in gene editing. So a little bit of familiarity with this particular topic, but can hope to apply some perspective to a lot of the people on the call as startup founders and how important these kinds of topics are even in an early stage.
Thanks, Ross. So before we kind of jump into it, I just want to say I'm pretty excited about this topic. This is a new one we haven't done before. We've never actually done a talk on quality. Usually you think of quality more in terms of like traditional manufacturing, medical devices, pharmaceutical, things like that, where you have required by law to meet certain thresholds and standards of conformity, compliance, safety, record keeping, traceability, things like that. But for a lot of our companies in biotools, some of them will at some point get to the point where they have to have quality systems, and some may not. But I think what I want to talk about, what we're going to talk about today, is the ability to the things that you want to learn and adapt from quality, whether they're required or not, because some of it just makes good business sense. And so we're gonna kind of jump into that. But before we kind of dive in, because some of you may not be familiar with quality systems from your past life or know the terms that we're talking about. So Nicole, can you lay us the groundwork and just kind of give us a working definition of some of these quality systems and what we'll be talking about today?
Absolutely. We've put together a little slide to help orient everybody of the different potential standards or regulations you may have seen or may not have seen or have heard from your customers. So ISO 9001, ISO 1345, those are both voluntary. 1345 can be required depending on what you're marketing to. Again, all of this is really focused on what your business plan is and where you're going. If you're in the US, CGMP is a mandatory regulation. If you're going to try and produce a product that the FDA wants is going to clear. GLP is for labs and again, mandatory. And then for CLIA, we have another mandatory set of requirements. So kind of, I don't want to read the slides to you. Y'all can take them in. And I think the focus in with this group and potential people listening is just most of these might be your clients. This might be what they're under the requirements of, and how can you best support them if it's not something that you need a requirement for. Is that a good way to tee it up, Jim, or is there anything else?
I think it's a good way to tee it up. In fact, I mean, I was talking to some of our companies earlier this week. We're doing kind of check-ins right now. And one of the companies I was talking to, they're like, hey, we're getting ready to submit a device master file record with the FDA because our customers are going to be referencing this in their future products. So more
exciting.
Of a regulatory specific thing, but it ties back into the back-end quality, I think.
Right. Right. That's exciting because that's an exciting phase to get to that for them.
All right. So before we jump into the questions, we're going to do something a little bit different this time. We've got a couple of polls for the group because we want to kind of get some at least baseline and information about where our listeners are on their quality journey. So can we bring up the first poll on which one of these are applicable to you in your company today, as far as you are thinking about or aware? And this could be now or in the near future.
And it could be directly them or the customer.
Yeah, I think
okay. So. This is great. Good mix.
Okay, we'll give it just a few more, maybe 5-10 seconds, and then we can wrap it up. Okay. So there we go. We've got really down the board, pretty consistent compliance needs. So good. Well, that's very interesting. So at least people are thinking about it, and it is applicable to most companies in general. So that's great. Let's go to the next question. Will you need to consider a quality system at some point in the future or today? I mean, now or in the future?
That's great.
We got a question. Don't normally do this, but Diana, what's your question? Or is that a yes, you are
No, that was I was looking at the chat and clicked it. Sorry about that.
No.
My bad.
All right. So we can end this poll. So everybody who's on at least is needing to consider a quality system at some point. All right, good to know. And then the last question for this part, where are you in your quality journey today? Can we pull that question up? Eve, can we pull up the next poll question? Where are you in your quality journey today? Okay. Well, maybe we'll come back to that one. I'm not sure why we don't have that one up, but we'll jump into the questions then. So, I guess I'd like to kind of ask each of you. We'll start with you, Ross, since you're an alumni. You've been through this on the life science tool side before. But what does quality mean to you, and why is it important to you and your company?
Yeah, it's something that's worth looking at, and I think every founder should understand it and think about it because it's when you really think about what is quality for whatever it is you're doing, it really has to be defined by your customers' perspectives. And I say that purposefully because I'm a business guy. I've worked with a lot of scientists. A lot of scientists tend to push quality, saying we need to measure these types of things. We need to do this, this, and that. But the reality is that quality is defined by your customer in terms of what they believe that they're receiving in terms of value. And it isn't always the technical, aspects of whatever your technology is, but it's actually what are they actually paying for? What are they hoping to get? And can you deliver that? And when you bring that kind of concept to your company, it it really starts creating a culture and it forces change within your organization to be extremely customer focused because ultimately your customer's paying for something, in my companies, I've worked with these really, I used to joke that they're like magic biosensors with carbon nanomaterials and semiconductors and biology. And when, we had to make things that no one had ever made before and da 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 da, right? And none of that mattered. It's super cool science. My customers don't care about any of that. They care about, am I getting data that is helping me move my process forward that's also correlative to where I'm trying to go and is therefore saving me money? And is that data reproducible and can I trust it? And when you use that end goal as that lens, you realize that quality is a pull from your customer, and it starts reshaping everything you do in your organization, from your sales op and your operations and everything, and even every person every day. They start thinking in the lines of, am I doing something that is going to help a customer buy more of my product and ultimately grow the value of the company, rather than what they think needs to be the right thing to do. So it does shape culture and organizations. There's a lot of systems, there's a lot of things, we're going to talk about those today, but the concepts of quality are very important because it makes you very customer centric all the way through.
Thanks, Ross. And just curious, when you're implementing quality, you've done it twice now with your companies.
Yeah.
Was it mandated? Was it required that you did it from the customers, or was this like a voluntary thing that you did just to ensure sort of benefit for the company?
Yeah, I can talk about the first time around because it was a bit of an interesting experience. So again, we use graphene, carbon nanomaterials, and a lot of these things that are really, really, cutting edge science in a lot of what we do. And all the experts in there were academics, and they came with a very academic perspective. An academic perspective is, I think this is correct, and therefore I'm going to go do that, right? And it so when we would run into problems in manufacturing, a lot of my scientists would be like, we need to do these types of things. And I'm like, actually, no, you don't, because nobody cares about that. What you care about is this other thing. And let's focus on those things. And it really got them to really rethink about everything, about their own science. And when we did that, we started looking at these new materials and how we scale and how we produce and what is the definition of quality. How pure do we need things to be in order to produce something that's real? Where is my actual flex? Where are the flexes in my process that can actually free up some of the ways we're really screwing something super tightly, trying to make something work? Maybe we don't need to screw that tightly. Maybe it's good enough right here in order to meet what the customer actually cares about. And it really changed a lot of our perspectives. And for me, it unlocked a lot of innovation. It's a weird thing to say, but we filed our first patent on how our sensor works, and then after that, we filed 85 patents on production because
Wow.
our entire team rethought everything they knew about graphene and started. And now they all look at the graphene community and they're like, "You guys don't know anything." We're like, "We were producing tens of thousands of these things with consistency," but it really forced perspective change. And so I introduced that because I come from manufacturing, and I said, we don't have a business unless we can scale this. And so I got them thinking about that because that is where our customers are going to stay focused on. And it worked. We were selling, and we were the only ones ever to have launched a product with that kind of material ever. But again, it goes back to that thing about getting people to shift their perspective, your team to shift their perspective and focus on why you're here and what people are paying for and what is the real value of what you're doing, and staying, and keeping that focus in mind, and not doing things that really aren't adding value to bringing more customers or getting your customers actually caring what they want, right?
All right. Well, I wish we had a microphone you could drop. I think we could stop right here if we wanted to.
Totally.
Well, it worked.
I almost did that reaction. On the...
it's worked twice so far, so
Yeah.
it seems to be doing okay. So
that is really huge, because to take that innovator and have them shift their focus into innovating into the manufacturing area like you did is really key. I mean,
yeah.
because you can just continue over into something that isn't valuable, like you said.
Absolutely.
Well, I
Yeah.
think
And
the perception to me is counterintuitive, because you think of quality, you think of things that slow things down, that make
Right.
you more
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
controlled, more prescriptive. But Axel, you're kind of on the other side of the equation. How do you guys think about quality, and how does it integrate with sort of the different owners, customers, or integrators of the systems?
Yeah, no, I think the customer approach is always the right way, and to kind of take a step back and talk about what does quality mean to all of us. We are all consumers, right, in our daily lives. So if you think about what does quality mean for a smartphone, what is the expectation for you when you buy any type of product or service in terms of quality, right? So on our side of things, of course, we're very specifically focused on the life sciences side of things, right? And then again, talking about the customer that you guys will serve, they all are going to be under some regulatory purview by the FDA or other regulators in the world, right? And with that comes expectations. And that is expectations both around the reliability and repeatability of the product or service that you are providing. But also furthermore, since you're early stage, also kind of lifting your view further down the line to the horizon when you are in full commercial distribution, there will also be then expectations that if something goes wrong with what you're selling, that you will have a capability to quickly identify what went wrong and then come back to your customer with a resolution to that. Again, just like us, if we have a bug in our Apple phone, we can go to the Apple store and get it fixed or whatever. So in general, the customer-centric view should always be front and center when it comes to quality.
Actually, can I key off of something that Axel said, and which is that comment about expectations. Um, you know, particularly when you bring something new to a market that hasn't been there, a lot of times you have to educate your customer of what you're doing. And so in that quality, the concepts of quality, they persist through everything. And one of the organizations in your company that actually should be, isn't normally part of quality, but should be, is your sales organization. Because the sales organization is setting the expectations in the customer of what they're going to get when they go buy it. And so the salespeople need to understand what exactly do we define as quality to set those expectations up front. So it is something that from a cultural perspective, it should permeate everybody, but when done right, it actually aligns sales with operations, with R&D, because everyone's talking to the same page. But that comment about expectations is really key when you are going to set your expectations with sales right out of the gate, and then the customer is going to perceive your product based on how you set it. And so, the quality alignment needs to be there, and the commercial organization even needs to be a part of that too.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead, Echo.
No, I'm just going to say, and it's like in any sales organization, if something goes wrong with which, if you distribute enough products or services, there will be things happening unexpectedly. The first person are going to hear from it from on your company or your sales staff, right? So with that in mind too, they need to be armed and able to respond directly to the customer in a proper manner as well. So that's another way to kind of look at, who will be interacting with the customer, especially and also when things don't go as expected. And that's where your quality management system and what you have around the quality internally is going to be a powerful tool for them to manage those situations as well.
Cool.
And I was going to add that, and whoever is implementing or managing your quality department system should be in that conversation also. Sometimes they're kept in a quiet little room because we want to minimize, but that's a perfect, what you said, Axel, setting the future and identifying where we're going with the customer is a perfect example of quality needs to scale with that, right? So as opposed to them building for the future immediately, if we can know what our customer needs now, we can build the appropriate support for that. And then staying with the sales team, how do we continue to iterate? How do we continue to develop so we keep going with the business, not counter to the business, which a lot of quality and regulatory organizations can do if they're not in that conversation.
Yeah. Michelle, I'm going to come right to you, but I want to say, just to sort of like make this a little more explicit, One of the ways I've seen sales integrate with quality is, especially in the medical device field, you have to report complaints. You're legally required to record complaints, and that usually comes, like you said, to the customer service, to the salespeople. And so that idea of documenting your process around when someone says, and a compliment can be a complaint too, but just documenting all of the comments in the field is a great tool for a company to sort of learn about their product in the field, specifications, how it's being received, things like that, uncover problems before they become big problems. Michelle, I want to kind of ask you to expand this topic. So we're getting into quality, but what's sort of the pillars of quality, and how does it change from early stage companies and late stage companies? Because I think they're probably a little bit different, right?
Absolutely. Um, Quite frankly, there are two or three pillars of quality. We've all been saying it throughout the conversation. Number one, it's the process to demonstrate control. And to demonstrate control with a process means people, materials, equipments, and things. And you create a process that's surrounded around two key objectives, ensuring that your end product is safe, and number two, that it's the variation is low in terms of reproducibility and repeatability. So you also want to ensure low risk um, where we all could go to McDonald's around the world and the Big Mac still tastes like the Big Mac. So ensuring that customer experience, meeting both regulatory and market requirements, customer demands is more or less what we're going for. And this scales, quite frankly, from an idea all the way to manufacturing at scale.
All right. We do have the poll back. So, Eve, can we get that poll up for where are you in your quality journey today? And while that's coming up and being addressed, Nicole, we kind of mentioned this, but at least in my world too, I think quality is often perceived as cumbersome. It's something you have to do, but maybe don't want to do. And, sometimes you're legally required to do it, but it's not easy and it slows you down. It's expensive. How do you see and sort of reframe this as an opportunity and an enabler as opposed to just a liability or not a liability, but just a difficult and annoying thing that you have to do?
I think, well, for me, I always start with what we're already doing. There's a lot of the behaviors or the hygiene that are required in the regulations or guidances that we put up that are also there we already do. So I always think about when I start with a company, you have a CTO, you have a good scientist, a good engineer. They already have good habits of that align with a quality system. So I feel if you start with where things that we already do, that we already know are good behaviors, and we do them because we see the risk of not doing them. So we label our records, our data, we version it so that we don't lose track of it. We test it. So I think starting where the people already are, or where the company already is and already utilizing, is a good foundation, so they can see that, oh, this is, yeah, we as a group of people, we should have a way of organizing this method. And then we can add on, the things that in the past have seemed like extra. We can then springboard from there and talk about why it's helpful, right? Like, why are internal audits helpful? Well, it's a way of checking to make sure these processes that you put in place and hope are running with a team of people are, and we're going to assume they are. We're going to check it. That's kind of the
Yeah.
where we start.
And I think at its simplest level, a quality management system is really just a documentation of here is how we're going to do things, and then
Right.
complying to that, right? At the end of the day, like, it's just, this is what I'm going to do. And then
Right.
the audits are, did I do the thing I said I was going to do the way I said I was going to do it?
Right. And it's nice when you think about customers, whether it's customers that you're selling to, whether it's investors. Now there's a trust and a faith foundation that they know that they have a reliable source. You can show it to them. You can, if you have somebody that is going to invest in your company and they want to know that you have a solid design or a solid product, you can show them, like, here's what we do and here's how we do it. Or if I have a customer that wants to purchase a large supply from me. Now I can show them that this is going to be a repeatable supply no matter when you come to me. I have processes that's repeatable. You can trust it.
And
Yeah, go ahead, Axel.
yeah, Michelle just also talked about the pillars of quality, right? And another pillar that I think is really important that it ties directly into this when you, Jim, when you say I perceived as cumbersome and just takes a lot of time. The pillar is education and knowledge, right? Because a lot of what we actually do in a quality management system is best business practices. One example is design controls, which applies to medical devices, which is directly aligned with project management best practices with a regulatory spin. And that's, everybody's using project management because it's an efficient way of building or developing things, right? So going back to what I started in terms of the pillar of education and knowledge, that's typically also what I see with startups that feel is burdensome, is that because they haven't really come over that hump yet to really understand how to operate within a quality system in the proper manner to their business, right? So I think education and support on that side is tremendously important, especially early on, to get you up and running and then operating efficiently within your QMS.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Axel. Thank you for bringing that up because I forget to mention that, and it's so key is that learning. And what you just said at the end, the efficiency, and unless we know what we're talking about, we can't then push on something to make it better. So if
Right.
people are they're not feeling good, they feel like something's cumbersome. Oh, here's quality again. That's one to lean into. Well, okay, let's make it better. Because it's not clear. It doesn't have to be done in a specific way. But it has to be done in a way that'll be efficient for you and good for your customer. And that comes with education. You're absolutely.
We got the poll in, and it looks like the poll
All
again
right.
is across the board, all stages.
Nice.
Perfect. All right, Axel, kind of back to you. When is the best time to start implementing quality and controls? And can you kind of explain what controls are? Because I'm not sure we've talked about that yet.
Yeah, no, sure. And of course, it's going to be like a politician's answer. It's going to depend on your on your technology, but also
So true.
going back to the centerpiece that we have here that we already discussed in length is the requirements of your customer, right? Depending on what your technology or service is and who your customers are, what are the requirements that they have upon you, right? And it can be various, of course, levels of expectation depending on how directly you impact what they are developing that may then come into patient contact. Say that you might develop some sort of a research piece of equipment for universities that are only used for that type of activity, or you might be developing a piece of equipment that is directly used in pharmaceutical manufacturing. Of course, that's then going to be very different levels of requirements from your customers in terms of what they expect you to comply with, and the associated documentation that you would have, both pre-commercially in terms of how did you develop this technology, the documentation around that so they can get confidence in your technology. But then, of course, if you're delivering something, say like a reagent or a piece of equipment, what is the documentation that you can provide around the manufacturing and delivery of that device? And you asked specifically around compliance, I guess, but generally speaking, compliance, when we talk about life sciences, that's directly tied to the regulations, which is founded in the law in terms of how we need to operate our business. But in this case, if you then may not be directly affected by regulations, again, it goes straight back to what type of regulations are your customers under, and how does that then trickle down to you?
Great. Ross, you've implemented this a few times with your companies. Did you start with like a fully baked system? Did you build it up over time in pieces? Were you trying to be compliant to one of the standards, or how did you kind of go about integrating that at the beginning stages through later stages?
I rarely implement the systems directly because I'm kind of a scotch tape and bubble gum kind of guy when you're building things. But I've worked in DoD manufacturing, consumer goods manufacturing before I got into life science, and so there's some pretty strict regulations around ISO 9001 and many of these other things that are very, very common in those types of fields. And so I brought a lot of that. But what you see a lot, particularly in big companies, what you see a lot about things like quality is quality is, if for those of you familiar with the Lean Six Sigma, quality is a business value add. At least the process of quality is a business value add. The other way I usually put it is quality doesn't matter until you don't have any, and then it's the only thing that matters. And what you see a lot of times is companies, they're like, hey, I've got a good product and we're selling just fine. And oh, we got to cut some margins. So we're going to cut these other measurements. We're going to cut this quality. We're going to cut these checks. We're going to cut these controls. And suddenly a customer gets a bad product and they complain. And now you're swinging the other direction, trying to solve it with millions and millions of dollars. So I've seen that a lot. And a lot of that happens because the process of quality gets in the way of the value of quality, right? And so, people are like, when they feel like it's burdensome, they're like, oh, I've got to fill out this checklist. Oh, I've got to do this data entry. I got to do this, blah, 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 blah. And they're just like, and your staff, the methods you go through, they see it as busy work and they'll do it, but it's not necessarily the thing that's motivating. And so I implemented in pieces and in little bits, but really with a way of looking at a full circle approach, meaning, okay, we're going to measure a few things and identify, okay, here's where we're having some issues, and then use that as an opportunity for the team to come up with ideas about, boy, now we have collected some information about why we're failing in this particular area, and let's come up with different ideas. And what happened was a lot of my non-scientists came up with the more creative ideas, and then they started implementing new things that the scientists like, this is great. I'll never forget, I had a woman who was excellent at quilting. And we had this issue, we were cutting this foil and it puckered the foil and it screwed up all the graphene. And she's like, oh, let's put it on these quilting tools. We'll just run it like this and everything's perfect. And everything went up like that. And all of our scientists like, this is amazing. I've never thought of these things. And the point is that by being able to measure that data and then sit down with the team and talk about, here's an issue we're facing. And as a team, we came together and came up with creative ideas. And then it becomes that story we've talked about for 10 years. It builds culture very well, but it also gets your team to start realizing, no, there is a value in filling out these checklists and collecting this data. So you don't want to just collect and record. A lot of the burden feels like it's collect and record. The key is regularly sit down and be like, where are we succeeding? Where are we failing? How do we look at this data that we're collecting, these records that we're collecting? And from this, as a group, how can we do better? And it creates that opportunity of building a tight culture and a team building approach, and everyone gets to add new things. And then people come in more motivated because they're like, I solved this problem, it was great. But you need that full circle approach of like, you're collecting data, then you sit down, you discuss problems. What does the data tell us? And more importantly, you also look at, okay, I'm collecting data. Do I need to collect that data? It's not telling us anything. We're good at this. Okay, maybe we just do simple checks and we eliminate that wasteful busy work. Oh, we're not collecting data over this. We seem to having problems. Okay, we need to collect things in a different way. And that creates that opportunity for building a team around that quality system. All of the methods here, they give you tools to manage that, but the key is what should we collect? How do we continuously improve? And how do we do that as a group with your team? And what you'll find is you will build an elite team very, very quickly with that cycle of process.
I want to add to Ross's statement that I think it's really important, especially if we have leaders here, it's really important to empower the CEOs and leaders to that mentality. I find too many times, because quality, it's kind of like, finance, or these areas we just don't want to think about and we just kind of accept, and quality can land there. You have your quality leader telling you have to measure certain things, and you're sitting in management reviews and you have no idea why we're looking at this data. And if that's how you feel, then we need to lean into it, right? The data should, just like you said, Ross, the data should be valuable. There's nothing that says I have to check certain things that don't mean anything to me. It should be meaningful for your business. And you saw the great output of that, right? When you are actually looking at things, and then stop looking. If something's not valuable, okay, let's move on to something that's valuable. And all of these programs have those metrics requirements, which is why I bring it up, because a lot of times we can just check the box to meet the metric requirement versus use it to help the business, which is really what you need to do.
That's great. Michelle, I got a question for you now. So what is we kind of talked about from Ross's perspective and Nicole's there, but what do you think are the most important foundations for an early stage company with a skeleton for their quality systems? Where should they be thinking about starting? Where's the biggest impact and the most value?
Absolutely. In terms of the biggest impact, first off, if you're still in discovery phase, take some light notes. You don't really need to have a formal process yet, but understand when you're ready to really build a product, there's discovery, there's R&D, and there's development. Once you reach product development, we strongly recommend that you like the team has said, either follow ISO 9001 or 13485 or build a system. It could be Lean Six Sigma, DAMIAC, where you could monitor and manage progress. Monitoring and managing progress as you develop shortens innovation cycles, which is what Russ was speaking to. And pretty much, you could do as you please. What we're looking for when we say quality is a standardized approach that the whole team comes together and follows so that we could manage and monitor together to the next innovation cycle. Um, so, and when we say processes, I like to define that as um, inputs. This is my process and this is my desired output. And having that line of sight will be a strong foundation for any startup in any business vertical.
And Nicole, how about you? Do you have a starting point?
Yeah, and I'm chuckling because, like Axel said, it depends, right? I always say that too. I definitely the documentation management process tends to be very tactically specific in that question, in that answer, across all of these. Tends to be a good springboard place to have a method for the whole company of recording versions. And I wouldn't even say early on, I don't want to say you have to approve them because you don't have a lot of people. I know people get kind of wrapped around that. I think at first just having a method. What's our nomenclature? How are we gonna do our documentation? And then, yeah, if you're a development company, for sure, design control is going to be a place. If you're supporting an organization, if you're a supplier, I would say doc processes, which go into doc control. Defining a process, the critical process for your customer, documenting it so it's repeatably manufactured is key. Having a way to inspect it is nice and important. I think so. When I go to it depends. It really is. What is your business? What is your customer? What stage are you in right now? And then let's put the right processes in place, whether it's design development, doc control, supplier control. You might be somebody who outsources everything. So let's just start with how do we create those relationships? How do we define agreements with our suppliers, or how do we decide which suppliers to vet? Those are kind of my initial starting places.
And if I just
And then quickly Axel training.
yeah. And also, if I can also chime in also back to what Michelle was talking about when it comes to product development and what should you document and what should you not or whatever. And of course, there's no exact guidelines, but a way to look at this that I think is pretty straightforward is that also when you start investing a lot of resources, time, people, money
Yes.
into various type of testing, say initially you do quick and dirty bench testings of your technology, but if you don't have raised money and you might need to do some sort of a GLP study or some sort of an animal lab or whatever have you, that's when it, for your own sake, is where it really gets critical to document that testing in a proper manner in terms of a test protocol. What are we setting out to do, but also then after the fact, create a solid report and outcomes, and because those are things that your future customer can look at. Plus, if you don't have that in the future, those can be gaps that are very hard to fill, and you might have to repeat expensive testing in the future.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I think you apply that to the customer also. If they're investing time and money into something, if you're providing them with something that is gonna support their submission or support their commercial launch,
I was gonna say, you're sending fear down my spine there, kind of like, the study didn't work. Why didn't it work? Did the product not work? Did our manufacturing not work? Uh-oh.
right. And then I just spent a bunch of time and money. I have
Yeah. All right. Well, we got another poll coming up. So this one, we'd like to know your view of quality in your organization. Your view of quality in your organization. So is it primarily a compliance requirement? Do you use it just for customers, or do you see it as a foundation and a core?
Don't worry, we can't tell what your answers are.
This is great. Yeah, we don't have, but
It's
hey,
anonymous.
it's such a balanced group here. We're across the board, so it's very applicable in different ways. That's great. All right, we'll give this one another 5-10 seconds, and we'll go to the next one. Great, we can end this poll. And yeah, it's pretty much even down the board with a lot of people, but half thinking it's just the foundation for the company. That's great. All right, the next one is, what concerns you about initiating a quality management system? And this is, I think, multiple choice. What concerns you about initiating a quality management system? If it is multiple choice, you know, try not to do more than 2 or 3. If it's all of them,
All of them.
but what are your top ones?
Uh-oh, making them think.
I got to read it. There's a lot to read.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a good one. It's tough, you know, deciding. Again, pretty balanced. Okay. Yeah,
Cost and slowing us down are the top ones.
bureaucracy.
Lack of experience in choosing the right standards is kind of second
Yeah.
place, scaling as we grow, and then fear of stifling innovation and integrating with existing tools and processes. All right, we can end that one too, and that's great. So I think very relevant conversation. Let's kind of keep going. Now I want to kind of switch gears and talk about kind of strategy, costs, and ROI with these systems. And Axel, I want to kind of start with you. How does quality help with de-risking your technology and company growth? How do you use it as a superpower there?
Yeah, so quality always comes down to confidence, right? Documented confidence in the technology that you have developed, but also then further down the road when you're manufacturing your device and selling it, or manufacturing your technology and selling that to your customers, right? And you're gonna pay in one shape or form no matter. I think, you know, in one of these polls, cost of the system or cost of quality was one that stood out, right? But I think what we hear, like Ross talking about here in earlier conversation, is that if you try to cut down on quality, it's gonna kick you from the other end, right? You're gonna start losing quality. You're gonna have poor quality in what you provide to your customers, and then that's gonna cost you probably even more. And in a different way, for instance, bad will, you know, if you're a new startup and you start launching technology and selling that, getting into a bad reputation can be tremendously difficult to wash away. And that's more than just money, right? So having a good confidence in the technology that you have developed and how you manufacture and distribute that to your customers is just a foundation for de-risking your business, period, right? It's the confidence in what you're selling. It's the confidence for your customers, you as a company, and if you don't have that, inevitably you're going to put yourself at unforeseen risks, maybe small risks in some cases, but there are also examples where startups have gone out of business because they've had early, especially if you look at in the medical device space, they have cut corners and get to the market, and then you have a failure in the field that might hurt the patient. That spreads like wildfire across hospitals, whatever, and that can shut down you as a business. Nobody's going to buy your product, right? So in summary, quality is the insurance for you to have good quality processes and making sure the confidence that you have in what you're selling. That's the insurance to reduce that you run into unexpected risks in the future. You might still do it, but the risk for that happening is significantly lower. And if you run into issues when you're selling, you're going to be better prepared in dealing with that in an effective manner.
Yeah, and I think it's the big R word there too, recall.
Right.
If you
Yeah.
get a recall, if you've got good traceability and good manufacturing documentations, you can maybe limit the scope of that recall. But if you don't, you're pulling everything, right?
Yeah, and since we're talking about, you know, selling to companies under regulatory purview, say a pharmaceutical company or a medical device company, what have you, if what you're selling is directly tied to the performance and safety of their drug or the device or what have you, and they have a customer complaint in the field, a failure, that's going to directly cascade straight down to you as a supplier, right? So while you might not be directly under regulatory review as a supplier, since your customer is, and they have then
Yeah.
requirements to drill down into you, then you are going to be directly affected by field failures that can be, affecting patients.
Right.
Absolutely.
Nicole, what is the most cost? This is kind of a question from the cohort that came in, but what's the most cost effective and productive strategy for quality implementation? And what should companies sort of think about in terms of like scope and cost when setting up these foundations?
Um, it depends. No, just kidding. Keep going back to that. I I think you need to treat it like any business unit or any business process. You need to focus on what is our milestone and goal that we are doing this for. Why is the business putting this in? And then let's put a reasonable budget of time and activity to do those things. So for example, if we're deciding to start supporting pharma with what we're building, or if we're deciding to start supporting medical devices with what we're building, when are we hoping the sales team will get to that target? And then based on that, what's the kind of quality, what are our priority quality processes to put in place? And these are all the conversations, like any business unit, you need to have with quality to bound them, and then set the next, OKR or whatever metric you want to set, and have them achieve it. I think it's most effective. A lot of times people don't treat quality like any other business unit, where you set expectations, you set goals, and you have them speak to, kind of like Axel just did, why are we doing this? What is the value? How is this helping the customer? Let's stay focused. So that all to say, I think, and then depending on the size of your company. So, cost, I think, budgeting, 5,000 a month as an initial starting point for an implementation of a quality system. You got some people, they're training your team. It's kind of a good ballpark. If you're a small company, 0 to 10 person company, don't have anything, and you need to start with something. Then we get into the softwares. We're going to have to, talk about which software, and this is where, again, scalability, right? Both with your system and your software. Don't put the system in now or buy the software now that is for where you're going necessarily, because you may not be able to afford it. So what is the right starting place? Where can we start that then can fold into the next one? Sometimes you need a springboard. Sometimes you need to start somewhere. And so if you have that mindset, okay, we're going to start in this software, we need to make sure that software we can roll into the next one. So, because sometimes those next ones are just too expensive, right? It's just not reasonable, but it is helpful to start,
Right. Michelle, real quick, there's so many forms a QMS could take, right? I mean, in my world, in the medical device, there used to be FDA paper-based systems. It was all documented on
Yeah.
paper and binders, and it was awful. Now, there's like probably very sophisticated softwares and things like that. But you could also maybe use Google Docs, Notion, something like that. Like
Totally.
what kind of tools or practical ways should people think about when they're sort of developing these early systems?
Absolutely. Definitely paper is still accepted in the industry. If you're early on a 2, 3 people team, I wouldn't recommend you buy an EQMS at that point. But being paper-based and understanding, buying maybe ISO 9001 or ISO 1345, the regulatory standards, and building a paper-based quality manual and quality system that's just, let's say, at design control phase is a smart tool, is a smart move. As you grow and you graduate up and you're really getting into development, and let's say you have you're investor backed, then the EQMS tools and smart quality management systems become more and more imperative for you to make that type of investment. And back of the napkin, it's less than 5% of whatever you would raise. And it's a good investment because it's already baked in. All of the ISO standards, that's what they're following. So it's baked in to work with you hand in hand. And that's a smart investment that will help you be audit ready and ensure that your submissions or you're meeting customer expectation in a seamless fashion.
Yeah. And, of course, I need to chime in here because the QuickVault product that I mentioned that I'm
Yes.
leading the strategy for is an EQMS. It's a cloud-based solution to manage quality management system in the life sciences space. And some other benefits that you would see in a modern solution in 2025 is going back to what we talked about first is prior experience and training. A lot of workflows in an EQMS have been automated, so you actually need less education and knowledge to follow processes. So if we talk about getting bogged down and operating efficiently, an EQMS is just the way to go in 2025. So that's really key. And we talk about for our product, we have customers going from the smallest of startups with 1 employee all the way up to 300. So depending on where you are in your journey and the requirements to apply to, but an EQMS is a tremendously efficient way to manage your QMS, and it's just highly recommended no matter the size of the company.
So can I just buy one of these systems and say, hey, I'm 1345 now?
You need to work a little bit with Nicole to make sure that your SOPs are in reflection of using QuickVault, but that's something that we help with as well. So collaborating with Nicole, we can get you up and running in very short time.
And I need to add to that. It's so true. People think set it and forget it. Well, I bought an EQMS, so that means I have so many innovators. Like I need a quality system, and then they go, well, I got an EQMS, and
No.
then you
No.
still have moments, which is, and you're right, Axel. They're definitely much more automated and helpful. But there's still decision moments. Like if your risk analysis is built into the EQMS, helping it gets back to training. How does the team know
Right.
what is right and how to support, whether it's your own submission or you're supporting a customer, and that's where the nuances can you can end up wasting a lot of money on your EQMS if you're not actually using it in that way.
Yeah. And I
Doesn't
think
run
that's
itself.
Yeah, an EQMS is a great foundation. I call it the foundational layer to make sure that everything's going well. It, it does a great job to ensure there's no really cracks in your process. You have a process baked in, but you also need the intelligence. And again, this is where Nicole, subject matter experts, making the right hires to build a quality organization comes in. Um, that's what I
Yeah.
have to add there.
I just have to give two more analogies. I do. It's like Asana or Salesforce. Asana, your project isn't going to run itself if you have a project management tool like
Exactly.
Asana, or
No.
your company. It's not going to sell if you don't have a salesperson running. Salesforce is a great tool, or a CRM is a great tool, but it's not going to run itself. You don't suddenly get stuff in the pipeline, right? So it's a tool.
That's a really good clarification for the audience, I guess, is the distinction between your quality management system, your QMS, basically the procedures of how you operate within the requirements of your customers or requirements or of the FDA. And modern software solutions like QuickVault is a tool to help you operate efficiently within that QMS. So that's it. It's a good conversation, good clarification, I think, for people that might be not as used to these terms.
Agreed.
Right. Ross, do you have anything to add?
I'm going to be the contrarian because like I said,
Yes.
I'm a Scotch tape and bubblegum guy.
They're MacGyver.
I've implemented ERP systems, manufacturing planning systems. I've implemented quality systems. I've seen them fail. I've seen them succeed. The issue sometimes, it does feel like, oh my gosh, a quality system, this and that. In particular, if you're going into a regulated market, the benefits of a lot of these systems is they force you into certain guardrails that you're going to have to meet in certain quality, right? But I know some of the people on this call are also selling, life science tools or things like that. They're not necessarily going to a regulatory market. It's more of a research market. What I find in the kind of like, how do I take nothing and make something kind of work, which is as a 0 to 1 startup guy, that's how I do it. I almost always have Microsoft Office as part of my core organization. And there's some actually really great tools that come with Office 365, like Forms. and it will make a spreadsheet. And I implemented quality systems by simply creating forms that my team in the lab could use on their cell phone, and it would automatically record data on everything they did in a spreadsheet, and then we can start doing analytics on it right out of the gate. And the nice thing for that is it allows you to prototype process. So where a lot of implementation of bigger systems goes wrong is if you don't really know what your process is, then it's not really going to work too well. But you can prototype process, you can try things, you can see what works, see what fails, you can start small, you can build quicker over time. And once you've got a better sense of like what types of things are worth collecting and what types of insights are worth generating are important, then you can start saying, okay, now there's a cost to data collection, a cost to following the process that a QMS is just going to save me this much money. And then it becomes a straightforward, like it costs me X dollars to run this process. If I buy this QMS, it's going to save me Y dollars, right? And then you can do this implementation. But again, like it has to start with your team understanding the value of the culture and what are you measuring. And a lot of times when you're starting out, you don't know those things. And so really just building a collaborative process, you can do a lot with what's included in Office 365, like very, very quickly. I had one of my staff, my former company, I went and sent him to Microsoft Power Apps training, and he started building apps. We ran our entire inventory control and purchasing system on apps he built with low code systems and Microsoft Power Apps. It was awesome. And so you know, I look at it that way, but like the analogy at the other time, the hard part about quality again is it's a direct cost and it's an indirect value, right? You can't say I put in X dollars and I get Y dollars back in terms of value, or I create my revenue better in this way. Or people are, you know, even investors, when you talk to them, they're gonna be like, oh, you got a quality system, great, but they aren't investing in a quality system. They're investing on product, market, blah, 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 blah. But what I will tell you is the indirect value is there. And so the example I'll give is when we started doing quality tracking and we started figuring things out, and I used the analogy from before, and we figured out how we could scale very quickly. You know, there were other people trying to sell sensors like ours and going in the market. And I'll never forget, I had one guy who was trying to compete with us who eventually died. He could produce chips at $50,000 a piece, and our cost was $20. And so I was taking 2,500 data points for the same cost it took him to generate one data point. And that is just a straight examples because we focused on manufacturing and quality and scale from the beginning to ensure that we could take large amounts of data very quickly. And by generating that many chips and by generating that many things, we generate a lot more data about the chips, which told us more about how to continuously improve, which you'll never get when you're doing one or two or three at a time. You know, you learn more with 1,000 than you do with 5. And that is going to continuously add value as you go. But a lot of the early stage stuff is prototyping of quality and what do you measure, right? We implemented, for example, an optical way of measuring our wafers very early that no one had ever done in the field at all. But we did that because we learned that how we package the chips, as I was telling my team, was 85% of our cost. And so I was like, I need you to eliminate the chips that are bad before we go package them, because every time you package a bad chip, we just threw away $15. And and we were making thousands of chips and hundreds of them were failing. And then suddenly none of them were failing after packaging because we eliminated all the bad ones. We figured out how to do that. And it saved us so much money. It saved us ungodly amounts of money that we would have otherwise spent on just awful things that we couldn't sell because they were failing, because we figured out how to early upfront measure certain things that matter towards the end goal. But you have to prototype that and you have to iterate very quickly. And so you really need to do that in a collaborative way and with simple tools that you can just kind of throw away. That's where Excel's great, and simple forms and things, just boot something up, and collect data at a very low cost, because in quality, the insights are valuable, but the data collection is a cost. The data storage is a cost. So that's why it feels costly. But really, if you can do your data collection as low cost, as low impact as possible, and then show the team the value of the insights that you generate and how that creates new opportunities to scale, it will dramatically improve the overall value. And you will see that indirect cost very quickly, right?
Well, that's our hour. So thank you guys. Can we give them a round of applause for this panel?